This is Dream Power Radio, the place where your dreams turn into reality. Here is your host, Debbie Spector Weissman.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International. I'm your host, Debbie Spector Weissman, the Dream Coach. This is the show where we talk about dreams, both daytime and nighttime dreams, and how you can use them to make the internal shift to a life you love and rediscover the truth of who you really are. Sometime around the late 1300s, tarot cards were created. At first, they were used for games and amusements among the aristocratic set in Europe. Then, during subsequent centuries, they took on a deeper meaning as a way to divine the future. We're going to take a look at how tarot is used today with my special guest, author and tarot expert, Sasha Graham. Sasha has used her interest in tarot to write several books, including Llewellyn's complete book of the Rider Waite Smith Tarot, and her own tarot decks, including her new one, the Dark Wood Tarot. Welcome to Dream Power Radio, Sasha.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, it is my pleasure. I'm so excited to be talking to you about tarot and actually be asking you the very simple question, why should I be interested in tarot?
Well, I think tarot is one of the most fun things and one of the most versatile things you could ever kind of have. You know, it's an innately magical device. I always call tarot the gateway to the metaphysical arts because you can use it for so many different things, like straight up divination. You can apply it to astrology, Kabbalah, numerology, color work, dream work, shadow work. It's really like this marvelous device that acts like a mirror for who you are. And you can pretty much use it for just about anything you want.
Isn't it wonderful that cards can do so much for a person? But I just have a very curious question, because all tarot decks include the same number of cards, the same card names. Why are there so many different decks?
Well, first I want to say that the reason that every tarot deck has the same innate structure, which is the four suits and then a major arcana, so the minor arcana and the major arcana. This is really what separates a tarot deck from an oracle deck. And there really is a difference between the two when you really start working with it. It's the structure of a tarot deck that allows all of these other kind of modalities to be laid on top of it. So that's there for a very specific reason. It's very concise. And that's not to say that oracle decks can't, of course, be used as well. It's a different system. It's a different kind of animal. I think you can go a lot deeper in a lot of different ways with the tarot. But the reason there's so many different decks out there and continue to be, because we've seen such an explosion, especially in the last decade. I mean, pick a topic, a subject, an aesthetic, and you will find a tarot deck, right? It's because you can really lay anything you want on top of it. You know, it has this kind of mythic structure and so, you know, like any good story, the elements are all there. You lay what you want on top of it. And it's really phenomenal because as a beginning reader, you want to find a deck that will keep bringing you back again and again. You want to be kind of seduced and beguiled. So there's really a tarot deck out there for everybody's taste. We're quite fortunate to be living in a time with such variety.
So if you were, say, in a store and looking at a bunch of different decks, you pretty much go to the one that you just feel something about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, your personal impulse and attraction to a particular deck of cards is always the first instinct that you want to follow. So, you know, and it's actually the same thing with reading of the cards. You know, what's that first thing that pulls your attention? That's even more important than what the card traditionally means. So you want to move towards what calls you toward a tarot deck, the same way you want to go toward what calls you in your life in any circumstance, right? You want to be following that inner impulse. So So you should definitely purchase a deck that seems really fascinating to you. And then if you really want to create sort of a solid practice, it's a wonderful idea to get the Rider Waite Smith deck, only because the Rider Waite Smith deck, which came out in 1909, and that's the deck most people are familiar with, lays the groundwork for a lot of the symbolism you find in most decks today, which tend to be Rider Waite clones, which is kind of building upon the symbolism you see in there. So yeah, the first thing you should get is the one that you're sort of like, wow, what is it? And sparks your imagination. And then to move deeper, you should get a copy of the Rider Waite.
Yeah, so that would keep you interested.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going. It's almost feeling that energy that comes from it.
Yeah, exactly. Because 78 cards can be overwhelming to learn. And oftentimes your appetite and kind of haste and excitement to read can become overwhelmed by all of these things to memorize. So when you have a deck that just keeps drawing you back again and again, I think that's really a game changer in terms of like diving deep into the tarot, because it really becomes it does become like a dreamscape in which you move into every single day. And so you want that to be filled with the things that kind of set your imagination on fire.
Why are some of the cards called the major arcana and the minor arcana? Does it mean they're more important than other cards?
So what's really interesting, when tarot first was out and around, and you were talking earlier about how it came out in the 14th, or the oldest deck goes back to the 14th century, and even older than that, because there's actually a Spanish philosopher who was living in Mallorca who was talking about tarot as far back as 1200. So it's a really ancient set of cards. And so what we're talking about when we're looking at the major and the minor arcana is a visual language. So we have to remember that back then, this is pre-printing press, books were not available. The general public was not literate, so the way that the church communicated was visually. So when you look back at these older decks, the Visconti deck, the Marseille deck, what you're really looking at is archetypal imagery that the churches, European churches, use to communicate their ideas. And so that's what you find in the major arcana. The major arcana are these like big kind of essential otherworldly ideas, like the lover, the star, the sun, the moon, the world, right? Which is kind of this nirvana kind of heaven that we can all kind of aspire to. So these can be considered our soul cards when they turn up in our readings, these major life points, these like big milestones that we really want to pay attention to. But that being said, the minor arcana, which pretty much aligns with the regular suit of playing cards, really speaks more to our day-to-day things that we do, like here and there. So I always say something in the minor arcana, like the Five of Cups, might indicate you being stood up for your date for this like guy that you're, and he stands you up. That's like a Five of Cups issue. But, the Tower card represents the last time someone stands you up for a date, because you just won't have that anymore, right? So that's major as opposed to a minor issue.
Okay, so now you have a deck in front of you. How do you use the deck to do a reading?
So it depends. So tarot is entirely dependent on who you are and how you're using it. And that's true of when you go and get readings as well, because you really wind up getting more of the personality of the reader, which is just a good thing to keep in mind when you're shopping around for a good tarot reading. But how you do a reading, well, you have to decide. Really, that's the first place for you as a reader. You're going to say, okay, am I going to utilize this reading to look into the future in a predictive, divinatory way, which is traditionally the way that tarot has been understood? Or am I going to do this reading to kind of look at my options and say, okay, this is where things are. What can I do to get X, Y, and Z? So when you're sitting down with your tarot cards, you're in the driver's seat. You get to decide what kind of a reading you're going to do. And then all of your questions and then information springs from that source.
So when you do a reading, do you ask a question first and then seek to get the answer?
Yeah. So if you're reading cards for yourself, I think for anybody who wants to use a deck of cards, and this applies for oracle cards as well as tarot cards, one of the greatest things you can do is just sit down in the morning, kind of clear your mind and ask a question. Ask a question, something as simple as, what do I need to know today? Or what should I look for today? Or what's going to help me have the best day possible? This is such a beautiful thing, right? Because it just sets you, it clears your mind first thing in the morning, and it kind of broadens your horizon. And then you sit there sort of with like a couple space, a little bit of breath, and then you flip a card and see what information comes to you. So it's really helpful to ask a question. Now, if you're reading for another person, then it becomes really fun because you can ask them or help them form a question if they have one. And a lot of times, like if you're practicing, your friends will definitely have like romance, family questions. But it can also be so much fun to lay out the cards and just tell the person what you see, and then find out how they resonate with what it is that you see. So you can use a question, or you don't have to use a question. And you can also pull cards just to kind of take the temperature of the energy of your day. So there's a lot of different ways you can go.
And I understand it's also a difference between whether the card is right side up or upside down, has a different meaning.
Right. So when a card appears upside down, that's considered a reversal. And again, when you're starting out, it's up to you as the reader to decide whether or not you're going to use a reversal. So if you're first beginning, like if you're already trying to like memorize 78 different meanings of the cards, if you add reversals in, that might just make your head explode. So like, go slow, go easy. In fact, if you're just starting out, just reading with the major arcana is a great idea, and add cards as you go. The most important thing is to stay open, because fear of being like stupid kind of shuts down a reading for yourself. So reversals, if you choose to work with them, you can decide if it's going to affect the meaning of the card. You can choose not to read, and I often do not use the reversed meaning. But if you decide to work with a reversal, it can mean the opposite of a card's meaning. It can indicate a blockage of that card's energy. But then that's wonderful, because if you get a reversed card and it signals a blockage in your energy, you can choose to turn it right side up as a magical act, sort of as opening up that energy. So it's a first step towards releasing that energy. You can use reversals in a multi-card spread that become part of the pattern. And so that's interesting. Numbers and reversals can really indicate the flow of the narrative and the story that comes through a large spread. And reversals can also, depending on the deck you're using, can become a part of the visual that you have your own interpretation for. So really, sky's the limit, but it pays to be really kind of open and just decide ahead of time what the reversal is going to mean for you. It's better not to decide after you're in the reading, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, I always like to see examples so my listeners can get a taste of how something works in practice. Can you give me an example of how a reading had an effect on either you or one of your clients?
Oh, well, yeah. Oh my God. I feel like my whole life is an example of how a reading can affect your life, because it's so transformative. It's so transformative. For me, for myself, one of the most extraordinary things that happens when you really move into an active tarot practice, which means that you are reading for yourself or others on a regular basis, is that you start to understand your own intuition and psychic ability. And what's interesting about that is that the trust in the cards spills out into your trust into all of your other decisions that you make. So I can give you an example of a moment when I was really excited about something and I was hoping it was all going to work out. And it was like this complicated thing where a lot of stuff had to fall into place. And I can remember pulling cards without attachment, without emotional attachment to the outcome. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that what I was aiming for was going to happen. And not only that it was going to happen, but that it was the right thing. And that's a moment I will never forget. If we want to talk about readings I've done for another person, sometimes as a tarot reader, one of the best things you can do is step back and just let the information flow through like a channel. And I recently was doing a reading for a dear friend of mine who was having all this information came through about her grandfather. And it was really about the ancestor work of behavior she was engaging in, feelings she was having that were not at all hers. This was inherited stuff from her grandfather, and it had to do a lot with darkness and self-harm and negativity. And I could just see by the cards, and I just knew that it wasn't her. It was like an inherited PTSD. And using the cards, kind of like a recipe came up for what she needed to do in order to regenerate that energy. So it wound up just based on the cards that came up that she needed to do a ritual outside and kind of open the ground with a knife and put in like a divining rod to let the energy move from him back into the earth so that it could be regenerated. And after she performed that, she just talks about the greater ease with which she's greeting her daily life. So yeah, that's a really good example of, and that's also a really good reminder. Sometimes the information that comes through for you as a reader doesn't make sense to you, but oftentimes it will to the person sitting across from you. So again, trust and the highest intentions.
Oh, good. We are just getting started, but we have to take a short break now. We are speaking about tarot with Sasha Graham, and we'll be right back. What do Thomas Jefferson, Elias Howe, and Paul McCartney have in common? They all understood the value of dreams, and as a result, the ideas, inventions, and creations from their dreams affect us to this day. What great ideas are you leaving on your pillow at night? Sign up for a complimentary consultation at my website, thedreamcoach.net, and discover why your dreams are a terrible thing to waste.
Welcome back to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Yes, welcome back to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, and we're talking all about tarot with Sasha Graham. Sasha, well, I've been playing around with your new deck, the Darkwood Tarot, for a couple of months now. I'm just pulling a card a day and just asking what it has in store for me. The interesting thing I found is I keep pulling two cards multiple times. It happens to be the Three of Pentacles and the Strength card. So what do you think that means?
Well, we call those cards a haunt, right? When certain cards haunt you, they just keep appearing time and time and time again. It's really fun when that happens because cards that repeat tend to really mark certain moments of our life. And we can look back, like next year, you might look back and, remember when the Strength card kept coming up? You'll know in retrospect why that was happening. So definitely it's something for you to pay attention to. Why I think the Three of Pentacles keeps coming up. And it's great because the two cards are really, they work so beautifully together. So the Three of Pentacles is about manifestation and creativity in the material world, because threes, the holy triad, right, is always manifestation, building, generation. And pentacles represent physical things, everything you can see, smell, feel, touch. So this is really about the multiplication of things in your life, from money to friends to business to things, which is also indicative of the season that we're moving into, because it's almost as if, we can all feel kind of spring in the northern hemisphere starting to rustle beneath all this snow. So we're moving into the period of time where things are going to be creatively building outside. So the Three of Pentacles for you coming up again and again is a constant reminder to be working with others, right? Because again, there's this cooperation in the number three, but also towards building whatever it is that you want to create more of in your life, in the physical realm. And this is also indicative of very good health. Now that coupled with the Strength card, which is a major arcana card, and is really extraordinary because the major arcana, and if you look at almost every card, you'll see a figure of a female with a great beast, usually a lion. And you'll see that she's taming the lion. And so this is really the card of internal strength, of the strength that we all possess without being outwardly forceful, right? It's the gentle touch. It's the inner strength of knowing, of kind of honing your skills. So what this is saying for you is that you have a firm grasp, and you also have the experience behind you in order to kind of guide where these pentacles are building. So it's a really interesting thing. If you think of the nature of strength of a very small child, like of a little baby, when a little baby like grabs your finger with their hand, it can also often be quite, you're like, whoa, like they can be so strong, right? Because every single point of attention in their body is working to squeeze that. We lose that ability as we grow older and as we expand. So there's something very similar about that in the Strength card, which is when you focus your attention, being able to focus in every way, mind, body, and spirit, right? So in that case, you become in complete alignment with the thing that you're focusing on. And when you're in alignment, right, that means being true to who you are, but also then you're met on the other side by the universe. And so there's this divine dance where you really become sort of the harbinger of this great beast who's willing to do anything that you say. And so between those two things, using that incredible focus and strength on the things that you want to fill your life with is just pointing you towards an outrageously bountiful spring. And I'd say it's all those cards coming up are just reminding you of how much power you have over your life.
Yeah, that's very interesting because, I also took it to mean, is it 3 as creativity? I just had a book that I'm in come out, another book I'm a contributing writer in, it's coming out in March. So, I had a lot of things being productive and doing this show and the TV show, doing a lot of things right now. And I sort of interpreted that as meaning that it's a confirmation that I'm on the right track. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and it's sort of coming along all well. And I bring that up because one of the things I find fascinating about tarot is its similarity to dreamwork, in that while each card does have an acknowledged meaning, what's more important is what the meaning means for you. Just like in dreamwork, there are symbols, and the symbols have acknowledged meanings, but the important thing is what the symbol in your dream means to you. So can you talk to me about that?
I'm so glad that you brought that up. I'm so happy to hear you say that, because one of the first things I say in classes, especially when I'm beginning with people who've really never worked with tarot before, it's easy to become intimidated because there's so many books and experts out there that are willing to tell you about symbols and dreams and tarot and this, that, and the other thing. You don't need that. You don't need it. All you need is yourself, right? Tarot is a reflection of who you are, just as your dreams are a reflection of who you are. And so what's important and where the work really lies is being able to figure out what these symbols represent to you. Everything is so incredibly subjective, from who we are as people to what culture we grow up in. Right. And that becomes quite kind of the joy of the work. I'm dreaming about tornadoes all the time. What does that represent? And that's really fun to break down. And that's why I love working, because the tarot is like this open workbook where you can start to pull apart certain symbols or certain suits that keep coming up. And then you get to deconstruct that by unpacking that. What you're doing is unpacking your own psyche, and understanding not only intellectually how you understand the world, but also you begin to notice kind of the different and unique ways in which you interface with the material world that is completely unique unto you. I always say, how you interface with the world, with your dreams, with the tarot is as unique as your kiss. No one else does it like you? And I think that so often there's so much language around it that can shut down people who are just beginning. And so I think being open and being willing to kind of be the Indiana Jones explorer of your own experience of this stuff is your greatest gift. And it'll also always keep you there as a beginner, which is the greatest mindset to have, even for someone who's been doing it for 20 years.
Could you keep looking at it with fresh eyes?
Yeah. Yeah. And the moment you think, oh, I know what that means, is the moment you've shut down possibility. And that's the reason that that's the reason that I do this, is to keep discovering, to keep moving further, right? Because that's the other nature of metaphysical work. No matter what it is that you do, there's always a further depth to move into. It's like painting, when you start like painting a tree or a flower, or if you're doing shamanic work, with an herb or a flower, you realize everything contains a universe within it, and it's infinite. So the question is, how far are you willing to go? And this is when we really start playing in the mystery, which is life. And I always say mysteries aren't meant to be figured out; they're meant to be enjoyed and played with.
What a wonderful thought. I want to take a second to talk about your new deck, the Dark Wood Tarot.
Yeah.
I have to say that a lot of the images are really spooky and scary. They're not these like beautiful images of goddesses and all kinds of lovely things. So what led you to create this?
Well, a few different things. First of all, I think that fear opens us up in a way that if we look at any kind of sacred ritual, you'll find that from Native American Indians to Catholicism, all of the sacred act is about opening us up so that we can experience something. Fear does this, like horror movies and spooky stuff. It arouses you, right? The same way that romance does. You get goosebumps, you start to breathe a little faster. You're like, oh, what's happening? You kind of like wake up. So I love that state. I love that state of waking up. So I'm just naturally drawn towards spooky things. But I'm also very interested in the dark side of things, because I think that love and light, while that's important and that's great, I think that again, it shuts out possibility. And I think that for tarot readers, it's very easy for us to get stuck in our same interpretations of cards. And if we're not willing to go into our darkness, then we're not willing to shed our light of consciousness onto something new. So I created the Dark Wood Tarot to really help push other readers and myself out of our comfort zones. I thought it would be really interesting to make a tarot deck that would look at the darker sides of the cards to help, like when you're doing magical work, taking personal responsibility is the first thing that you have to do, right? A witch is not out there manipulating other people. A witch is in charge of her own internal reaction to the world. She's casting magic on herself, right? Not others. So I thought it would be a really interesting thing to do a tarot deck that really kind of can call you out on your own behavior. And that's not necessarily an easy place to be in, but nothing that creates transformation in your life is necessarily easy. So I wanted to create a seductive and beautiful, dark fairy tale landscape where you might be seduced in to look at the darker, unseemlier, and scary parts of yourself and the world. And in doing so, shed the more light of consciousness onto yourself and others.
No, Sasha, I have a million more questions, but I only have time for this one final question. How can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, they can go to my website at sashagraham.com. They can also find me on Instagram. I'm very active on Instagram at Sasha Tarot Diva. I'm a Llewellyn author, so you can find me on the Llewellyn website. I'm also a Lo Scarabeo author, although they don't list their authors. And you can find me on Facebook, Sasha Graham 1 on Facebook. And if you go to my website, sashagraham.com, you can also sign up for my newsletter, and then you'll always be alerted to special classes or new books coming out. I have a new book coming out, The Magic of Tarot, at the end of this year.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for being on Dream Power Radio today. We've been speaking with tarot expert Sasha Graham. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. If you have, please tell all your friends, subscribe, and drop a positive review on your podcast site. Until next time, This is Debbie Spector Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.
You've been listening to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector Weissman. For more information on Debbie or to sign up for her newsletter, go to dreampowerradio.com. This has been Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International.